everyone. Welcome to session 6, special session with First Gen Caucus Chair Malin Van Dam and HSDA Immigration Committee member Marshall Romero. They'll be taking us through the state of immigration in America today, and I'm so excited to have them on. All right. I'd love for you both to introduce yourselves and then go into what you plan to talk about today.
Hi, I'm Millen. I'm First Gen Caucus Chair and I'm the HSD Chair and a bunch of other stuff. Um, but yeah, I basically have a presentation that I'm recycling, but it's decent.
Yeah, certainly. My name is Marshall Romero. I'm the communication staffer at the High School Democrats of America Latino Caucus, and I'm here to present on immigration. And pardon, Millen, are you screen sharing? All right. So just to begin, everyone, welcome. This is a part of the HSDA immigration. So today we'll be discussing immigration legislation on the state level, as you can see. And now more than ever, it is absolutely imperative to talk about this in our ever-changing world, as America has been extremely hostile to people from immigration or immigrant backgrounds. And we know that this is absolutely important to highlight for our API and Latino communities. So Millen, I'll let you take it away.
Okay, so in terms of background, undocumented immigrants are like a very significant part of the US economy, and as we'll see later, that includes like AANHPI communities. And then also like the Trump administration's policies pose a risk to both legal immigrants, refugees, so people on like temporary protective status, and well, obviously undocumented immigrants. So yeah, undocumented immigrants paid almost $60 billion in federal taxes in 2022, and are around 40% of agricultural and 20% of construction workers. And Trump's deportation plans are estimated to reduce the GDP by 5.1 trillion over the next 10 years. Um, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
and on top of that, these statistics also highlight how immigration is very imperative, as we see a lot of immigrants coming from historically third world countries or countries that have less resources, and absolutely crushes the misconception that a lot of immigrants are here to commit crime, as we see in AANHPI communities and Latino communities, that a lot of us make up the majority of labor force in America and contribute financially. So that's why it's absolutely important that these individuals have resources and are allowed to stay in America. Highlighting key immigrant rights, that regardless of your documentation status, you are still entitled and absolutely have rights in America. If you're an undocumented immigrant, you are at risk of being subject to Immigration and Customs Enforcement, also known as ICE, and that crackdowns should be expected to occur at any time and place, as we've seen in the media, especially when it comes to individuals on student visas or coming to America to study. And ultimately, if you have legal status in the US, you have to provide legal documentation. So right now, more than ever, it's absolutely important that you carry some sort of identification at all times. And ultimately, this slide is highlighting things that you should know and that you still have rights regardless of your status in America.
Okay, so basically, like if you do experience like an immigration raid or immigration crackdown, the first thing you should do is like stay calm, and regardless of like the possible actions you may face, you should still not lie about your status or provide false documentation, because that's just an excuse for them to like deport you really easily. Um, and if you do not have legal status in the US, if you have legal status in the US, provide documentation, and try to carry some form of identification at all times if you feel that you would be at risk. And basically, if ICE raids your home, they need a warrant signed by a judge to enter your home, which we'll see on the next slide, and ask the officer to slide it underneath your door, because, you know, if they come in, that they've come in. And ICE isn't really playing nice now. Um, and the Trump administration has authorized ICE to operate in sensitive areas, including in courthouses, schools, and churches. But some states have laws that restrict ICE from doing so. Like in Maryland, we had a piece of legislation that almost passed to do this, but our Senate president, never mind. So if you are a US citizen, you can report your experiences to stay safe and also to like help other people who may be at a greater risk than you. Anyway, okay. So here's an example of a valid and invalid search warrant. So as you can see, this search warrant is actually signed by a judge. It is an actual judicial warrant. This wouldn't that this is, does not legally allow them to enter your property or arrest you on like no criminal basis.
So yeah, ultimately having the presence of um warrants is very important. As we all know, people working under all sorts of the legal umbrella, whether that's police officers or people working for ICE, it's absolutely important for them to have these papers, just in order to make sure that they can actually conduct searches. As we see in many more politically hostile states, that many individuals or typically law enforcement are conducting these raids or otherwise searches without warrants. So it's absolutely important to memorize that these individuals and the people conducting raids need these warrants in order to perform whatever they need to do. So knowing what one looks like, knowing what one looks like, what a real one looks like, and that they need to be signed by judges is really important. And these are ways to help. So ultimately, as we know, the environment in America has been very hostile, especially in red states and now under Trump's America. So being an advocate is one of the best ways to prevent future instances of mass deportations. So providing legal pathways to citizenship for documented migrants already in America is safe and humane. Um, and directing people trustworthy, as we see that the ACLU and other organizations focus on protecting these liberties and rights that everyone is entitled to in America is super important. And now, especially more than ever, they've been active just because of everything happening. So recognizing that there are organizations that can help you is very important. And in the moment where you are subject to ICE raid or you do have a legal
Okay, I think he's gone, so I can just do you want me to just like redo this slide? Mm,
Yeah, for sure.
okay, so basically, being an active advocate is obviously like very important to prevent future instances of mass deportations. Um, so that means like going to protests, social media, stuff like that. And a legal pathway to citizenship, for undocumented migrants is like, the goal, but we're in the Trump administration, so yeah. So generally, if you're in a position to do so, I would encourage directing people who are at risk to trustworthy legal resources. Um, and there generally are in most areas pretty good local nonprofits and legal organizations who may provide services for undocumented and also now documented immigrants. Um, but if that's not possible, then there are national organizations. They just generally are slightly more busy now. But yeah. So also volunteering with local organizations to support undocumented immigrants who may be utilizing those services can also help. It's like phone lines and stuff like that. And then also, as I'll get to like in a few slides, calling and emailing your state legislature to ask or advocate for bills supporting immigrants and protecting immigrants from Trump administration policies. Um, yeah, and also, well, I mean, now this is basically many states have bills that are currently being considered, whether it's like in committee or on the floor, regarding protecting immigrants against the actions of the Trump administration. I'll talk about those later, I guess. Um, and you can report raids, like the best hotline for reporting unlawful immigration raids is through United We Dream. There's the phone number you can call and text, and they like it if you take videos so that they can have a better case. Earlier in my original version of this presentation, back in like January, I guess, very, very early Trump administration, we had the ICE hotline there. But that doesn't really work anymore because their definition of an unlawful raid is not very lawful. So definitely rely on third party services. ICE is not going to help anybody. Anyway, in terms of the impact on AANHPI communities, Asian Americans are the only racial group that are majority foreign born. And 1/7 of undocumented immigrants in the US are Asian Americans. Um, and 79% of ANHPI adults see lawful immigration as having major benefits for economic growth, which is higher than basically any group. And many Asian Americans have seen their student visas revoked due due to recent actions of the Trump administration, as you may know, especially those who are speaking out about like issues in Gaza or just been like strong advocates in general. And Asian Americans have among the longest wait times for visas, and the Trump administration has previously and will likely continue to significantly reduce the issuing of green cards to these populations, specifically from India, China, the Philippines, Vietnam. But like those are because those are the groups that request the most green cards, and generally when they limit green card like issuing, those are the groups that are most significantly affected. Good. Oh,
Yeah, absolutely. So next we'll be highlighting the sanctuary policies, but to ultimately be familiar with them and what they are, first we need to know what a sanctuary policy is. So as you can read on the screen, sanctuary policies are laws or that limit for federal immigration authorities. It means information about immigrants and federal operation of local law and endorsements whistle to me. I happen to live in one of the most undocumented Latino and Asian population. There are many regulations that actually protect and ultimately prohibit the status of individuals illegally from being disclosed. So sanctuary policies are very important, and we see them in typically blue states that protect people the most. Oh, uh, uh Millen, may you change the slide?
so this can be implemented on the state level, so through state legislatures, which is primarily how. Well, wait, no, never mind. The sanctuary law. So that's been more common recently than it was before due to the actions of the Trump administration, especially with like more broad sanctuary policies, like not sharing information with ICE, which is something that we did here in Maryland with the Maryland Values Act. Um, and on the county level, so through county councils and municipality levels, so city, town councils, commissions, mayors, that is those are historically like the levels where it's been the most common. I know many counties and municipalities in Maryland are sanctuary counties and cities and towns, and that is the same across the country. So if you live in a like kind of blue area, but that is not a sanctuary city, um, that's definitely something you can advocate for. And generally, advocacy at that level is fairly effective, due to its smaller scale. Okay, and then in terms of sensitive locations policies, this is, as you may know, and like I mentioned a few slides ago, the Trump administration did revoke protections for sensitive locations, which is something they did in within like the first few days of the first Trump administration. They put back, and then I mean the Biden administration put back, and then the Trump administration once again revoked. Because they did this in their first administration. Many state legislatures did anticipate this and did introduce bills at the start of the session. So many of those right now, if your state legislator, if your state legislative session is still ongoing, will be close to on the floor, or they may be being reintroduced already if that's a thing in your state legislature. So basically, they limit and attempt to restrict immigration enforcement in sensitive locations like schools, hospitals, courtrooms, libraries. This can be especially important for young ANHPI communities, schools, and can prevent the most vulnerable communities from being affected, and can allow for like a fair judicial system, which is why that's not a thing at the national level. That's not exactly the interest of the Trump administration right now. Okay, and then this can be implemented on the federal level through Congress, or it can basically just be put back on by the executive branch. Like, but obviously the Trump administration and Congress right now is not going to do that, or not going to do that. And right now, what's most significant is implementations of sensitive location policies at the state level. So it basically attempts to replace the federal policy. So here's our Protecting Sensitive Locations Act in Maryland. It did not pass, but in time at least, which is unfortunate, but we did pass some pretty significant sanctuary policies. So that's great. But for legislative sessions that are still ongoing, for many legislatures, this is more doable than sanctuary policies. So that's definitely an important point of advocacy.
So yeah, there's many ways to advocate for pieces of legislation, and we see the implementation of policies like these being more common and ultimately widespread in blue states or blue areas. For example, and that is personal to me, I've had policies like these reflected in Houston, but not on the general demographic of Texas, as Texas is a Republican state. But ultimately, trying to be a student advocate, or at least pressuring your lawmakers and putting more attention to policymakers that focus on these issues. It's very important that you tell the lawmakers or legislatures, especially if they're Democratic, to hey, introduce these protections for the people that are undocumented. So if your legislation in your state has been introduced, you can advocate for it. You can typically track where the bill is. And I know that my session in my state is ending soon, but I understand and recognize that the session for different states is different year round. So whether that be collaborating with lawmakers or people who are in policy making positions, it's very important that you pressure your lawmakers and ultimately advocate for policies that attempt to humanize and keep migrants in the country.
Okay, so basically that's the end of the presentation. Technically you could ask questions here, but also you can always just contact me. I put my contact information here. Marshall, if you want to just like say yours, that works too.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm in the HSDA Slack, and I'll definitely put my email in the chat. But if anyone has any questions or any remarks they want to make or why this is important, this is now the time. And just thank you for everyone for being here and ultimately listening to this very important topic.
All right, if anyone does have any questions, feel free to ask, but so I'll give a second for that. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you guys so much. It has been a genuine pleasure to host y'all. So this is the end of special session and session number 6 of day 2 of our AANHPI Virtual Summit. So this is our last session and we can't wait to see you tomorrow. Thank you guys so much for joining us for this last one. And thank you, Millen and Marshall, for hosting this last one with us. All right.